Hello, everybody. We are the guys who ruined your tea break, but we're not sorry for it. We're very happy to have you back, and we will have a great conversation, and we only have 45 minutes, so we need to be quick. I will quickly introduce my great panel of today, starting with you, Sylvie. Sylvie Lemoine, you are Deputy Director General of CEFIC, the European chemical industry. Thank you for joining. Lorenzo Casullo, you deserve a Darwin Award because you succeed to join Brussels in those funny days, so thank you for being there. Lorenzo, you are European Regional Director, Ricardo. And then you, Steve Milbury, coming from Canada. You are Vice President of Business Development Opportunities for New Brunswick. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Frederic Donck, and I'm the Managing Director of Tamada Consulting. We help decision makers to engage audience, and sometimes we do it ourselves, as you will see today. Let's start with the first question. We see everywhere a lot of conversation about those Canada-US tariff tension. I understand that it affects average 15% of the trade between the two countries. But the impact sector are very significant. So my first question to you all would be, is it concretely a game changer for Canada? Do you see any European companies that now are hesitating to invest in Canada because of that? Well, this is a global question, but indeed, I have my eye on you, Steve. You are the forefront of this. So what's your take?
Thank you, Frederic. It's certainly interesting times for sure. We've seen a lot of activity more recently here with the continued conversations around tariffs and how New Brunswick in particular, not just Canada, but New Brunswick is reliant on the US in terms of our exports. Today, we're 92% reliant on the US for our exports, mainly with oil and gas. We have the largest refinery in Canada with 300,000 barrels a day. We also have a significant forestry industry. And those two products alone make up a significant portion of what is coming from New Brunswick into the US. So for us, are we going to see significant changes? Probably not so much on the oil side, but certainly on the wood. And even more so here recently with the exchanges between the US and Canada, we're hearing more about the tariffs on wood and how they're increasing. And even more recently, we've seen orders decrease on the wood side with our neighbors in Maine actually closing down one of their mills to not closing the mill down, but not accepting product from New Brunswick any longer. So are we going to see the impacts? Absolutely. Having said that, though, we also have a very diverse economy in New Brunswick. We have a significant food industry. We have a lot of advanced manufacturing. We see a lot of things happening across the province that are now opening up for new markets. We also see new relationships being built around the world, and some of those relationships are actually here in Europe when you think about steel products, and we see steel products coming into Canada, and also partnerships with our partners across Canada in different provinces who manufacture steel as well. So we are definitely going to see some impacts. We are seeing the impacts, but now more than ever, New Brunswick, not just New Brunswick, but Canada is also becoming more resilient, hence why we're here today. We've been coming here for a long time. We've been coming here for 30, 40 years. And as a matter of fact, I'm here today with the CEO of the Port of Belledune, which is a critical asset for us in the province of New Brunswick. And he was once a former deputy minister with the province of New Brunswick in economic development. And even back in his day, not to age him, but he's been coming here for a long time. So this is not a new endeavor for us, but as you've seen in the news, elbows up. Everybody in Canada right now is taking this very seriously, and we're all here trying to make a change and strive to connect with more people, create new relationships, and build a broader network.
Thank you very much. Lorenzo, you're doing strategy consulting. So what do you see from your side? Are your piles of dossier going up or slowing down? What do you see concretely?
I'm going to give you a strategy answer.
Yeah.
But it really depends what you believe in, whether you believe this is a short-term change which will go away, or whether you believe it's a trend that will accelerate and continue. So the only way that you can react today as a company is scenario planning. If you believe in A, you plan for one scenario. If you believe in B, you plan for the other. Best is to plan for both, because we don't know what's going to happen. But the reality is that you may be worried if you exported goods to the US. All the mentions that Steve gave are, products. If you're exporting services, there is no change today, and so it continues to make a lot of sense to be thinking of Canada as a base for the whole of North America.
Sylvie, from your industry, is those tariff issues, is it a big issue for you? I could think of anything else like energy costs or whatever, but is tariff also something on your priority? And your mic doesn't work. Yeah.
Fine, thank you. Yes, so I think it's an accelerator, a catalyst. I don't think we waited to have the issue with the US tariffs to cooperate. So maybe a few words on our industry to shape a bit why I'm here and why I think it's important. So chemical industry, it's not only about cleaning products and a few pharmaceuticals, it's actually all the materials. Materials are chemicals, it's advanced materials, it's all the innovation, it's the defense we talked about earlier, it's the digital, but it's almost, we call ourselves the industry of industries. Even the European policymakers call us now industry of industries, because we're simply enabling all over manufacturing sectors. So that's one thing. This said, yes, we are an energy-intensive sector, and that's one of the prime reasons we are struggling right now in Europe, probably different in Canada. We have a very demanding carbon policy, so we need to spend, and we have the Green Deal, and we are committed to decarbonize, but that requires hundreds of billions of investments over 20 years, so it's huge. And right now, we have all the trade pressures in addition. So we have limited growth. I think that's something we share with Canada. Demand is limited. We both want to move towards more sustainability. I think we value quality of life, quality of materials. So a lot of common ground. Trade pressure, not only the US tariffs, but also from China, at least for Europe, but you probably see it as well in Canada. With a lot of dumping and a low rate of enforcement of our rules at the border. So with all that, we have huge competitiveness challenges, and the growth is actually very much relying on other regions, meaning free trade agreements, which is why we've always been supporting CETA. And as we heard at the beginning, it has already delivered major growth. So our exports, EU27 exports to Canada for the chemical sector are worth 5 billion, and they've been increasing since CETA, or at least the provisional agreement, and vice versa. It helped imports, so we export more than we import from Canada, but nevertheless, it brought value on both sides. So we want to build on that. We didn't wait, but we need much more partnerships. We have shared values, we have a certain trust and reliability. You could say 3 years ago it was the same with the US, you could say that, but okay. Let's build on what we know today, right? So shared values, again, environment, sustainability. If Canada could sell us their energy cheap, then I think that would help even further, but there's room for more, for sure.
Come back on this. Please do.
So thank you, Sylvie. That was great. But come back to what Lorenzo said, and then I'll just jump on to what Sylvie just mentioned as well. But in terms of export today to the U.S., under CUSMA, still 85% of the goods that travel across the border. And coming back to the service industries, we're still in a good position, and we do see lots of investment still coming into Canada on the investment side for services being offered in the North American market. Coming back to cheap energy, what I would say around that is that Canada has a very affordable cost for energy. We also have lots of land. So one thing that I've noticed here recently is my travels around the world, and I was in Japan, and some folks shortly after my trip to Japan came to New Brunswick because they wanted access to critical minerals, which New Brunswick and or Canada has a lot of. They wanted to take this mineral all the way back to Japan, and they could do that in a cost competitive way. So what I would say is that where we strengthen our partnerships is really understanding the value prop between Canada as a country, but Europe, understanding that we have access to lower cost energy, lower cost resources, we have the infrastructure, we have the people, we have the talent, we have all the things necessary to help businesses grow. It's a matter of identifying how we create these cross-Atlantic channels to better deliver in a competitive way. And I do think that Canada has something to offer Europe, and Europe has something to offer Canada.
Thanks. Actually, you're already ahead of me with some of the questions I was about to ask you. So I love the idea. You're making me redundant on this panel, which is perfect. I'd like to come back to these tariff tensions. So I'd like to hear from both of you if you see any sectors, or from top of your mind, 2 or 3 sectors that you see really show the competitive advantage of Canada as a highway to the US market, for example. Do you see, irrespective of all those tension, sectors that are success stories that you could talk about? Go.
Sharing the microphone gracefully, that's fantastic. I think going back to energy, we can open a really interesting discussion on energy, if you all agree, because you've both mentioned it. So currently what happens, energy production from Canada goes to the US, and from the US, it's exported to Europe, basically, to summarize. This is a dependency within a trade system. So the trade is still recorded as Canada to Europe in a way, but it's a dependency on infrastructure of a third country, which, listening to the minister's opening remarks, apparently is a policy goal to reduce that dependency and boost the infrastructure in Canada, right? That's the ability to go from a Canadian port to a European port, for example. Not suggesting we build pipelines under the ocean necessarily, but we create that infrastructure for smoother exports. So the dependency of today, Frederic, I would say it's there, but it's a very, very good example of how we can engineer the investment for the next decade to take it away and to increase that transatlantic direct relationship. So the weakness today can be a strength tomorrow.
Nice message. Steve?
Thank you. So I think I mentioned it a minute ago. I think we still remain fairly competitive on the services standpoint in Canada. And coming back to AI earlier, Canada is doing an amazing job around AI and AI development and driving innovation. The province of Ontario, Quebec, and then some of the other smaller provinces are competing and doing well on that side of things as well. But coming back to the energy side, we continue to see energy flow north and south. That continues to be something that's in demand, and we don't see that going away. Critical minerals is another thing as well, but that is something that we need to be cautious of. Today, we would take a lot of our minerals and we would ship them down to be value added, and we need to find a way to work with our European partners to keep that product in Canada and also be in a position to export those to other markets. We cannot continue with being so reliant on one market. It's not an easy solution that we have in front of us, but it is something that we need to keep to push towards. So,
thank you. Just moving to the next question, because I will jump on what you just said. So we see some economic urgency those days, since January 2025. I mean, inflation, the energy shocks, supply chains, fragile supply chain, that kind of stuff. Concretely, really, no wishful thinking, concretely, concrete action, what would you think Europe and Canada should do together, those environment? Who want to take it?
Should I? Okay. So first, it doesn't have to be only EU and Canada, because you were talking Japan, and I was going to say, I mean, there's more than bilateral. So where you have your common ground and trust and again, contractual arrangements like free trade agreements, then there's room to build on it. Clearly, raw materials. We already have a strategic partnership with Canada on critical raw materials. Europe is a big market, definitely. So that should create opportunities, energy to some extent, but battery materials. So you have graphite, nickel, cobalt, etc. Very useful rare earth, I believe, to some extent. So all the semiconductors and digital bio-based feedstock. The EU is coming with a bioeconomy strategy. Circularity is important. We need to diversify our feedstock in the chemical sector. So for sure, I think there would be concrete opportunities with Canada. And then I think we need to think also more on the enablers, like how do we maybe change our public procurement rules to create more space to partner countries, for example. We start to talk made in Europe. Should it be made in Europe and in FTA partner countries, for example?
That would be great. It would be a brand, something. I was about to ask, with a good, strong brand, Lorenzo?
If I can add to that, I think all of these sectors, Sylvie, they require investment, no? Infrastructure, energy, chemicals. And what the issue we have with CETA today is we have the tariffs part sorted, even in the provisional form, but we don't have the investment protection and the non-tariff part sorted. So where can companies have a quick win? Well, if the two sides act together and do the famous regulatory alignment on anything that doesn't require member states approvals, WTO approvals, where there you have the quick win. And that's what companies are waiting for. So one example that we could use from the railway sector is that Canada decided to adopt European safety standards for its railway infrastructure, ERTMS, for the technical people in the room. What happens then? Fantastic. That's a global standard made in Europe, export opportunity for European companies, not just to sell in Canada, but to establish their base, to train the engineers, the safety inspectors, and there you create something out of the CETA, which starts with a C because it's comprehensive, and it's non-tariff, and it's independent of any multilateral long-term decisions, something you can do really quickly.
Nice. C from your side?
I would agree with Lorenzo. I think that, here's a great example. There's a company out of, I believe it's Finland, and they manufacture hot water tanks, and they're a resilient hot water tank. They have a stainless steel water tank, and it holds the heat much better. So they're selling those in Canada. They've started down the path. They're looking at the Canadian marketplace and then looking. So there's an example, from my opinion, how an organization has looked at Canada, but breaking down the policy barrier and making sure that whether it's Canada made or European made, that we can meet the standards. Obviously, there's different electrical issues and things of that nature, but nonetheless, I think there's an opportunity there.
You want to add something?
Maybe to build on that, because another example coming from CETA in the context of regulatory cooperation is from the pharma sector, where you have good manufacturing practices, which guarantee a certain level of safety and quality of the medicines. And that's working well. And we have this common ground, and it's all standards. You could build further on standards. Another example, another area where you could build standard is on product carbon footprint, because this is really something we share. We want, I think, in both regions, we really want to move to more sustainable products and more sustainable production. But to do that and to compare, to be able to exchange, we need to provide the information, for example, to consumers. You need some form of standard, whether it's a label, whether it's whatever it is, but you need some standards. And you need a common language to talk to consumers, to customers, to industries. So that's an area where we don't have a global standards yet. So you could start with countries that have the same mindset. Maybe Japan would be interested, maybe Australia, maybe some, there's a few I can think of who share this willingness to move. And then, standards, completely agree.
And we can use it for sustainable data centers. We can use it for AI, ethical AI, everything that we've been discussing in the previous panel, and contribute to that investment flow by harmonizing. I agree with you there.
Wonderful. And I see Michael, I'm smiling because I know you will in the next panel talk a bit maybe about compliance standards. I know it's one of your favorite topics, so stay tuned for the next panel. But we can address it already. I'm interested to hear from you about SMEs, because we talk about regulation. That is something that might help SMEs better expand or indeed better meet all those challenges. What it is that should be done for SMEs in particular in this respect?
I can speak to some of the work that we do. So I'm not sure it's clear in the title. My VP of Opportunities New Brunswick, I represent the government of New Brunswick. We are the lead sales agency for the government. And we go out around the world to help New Brunswick companies, SMEs, get access to new markets. So the thing that would be easiest for them, and what we hear from them on a regular basis, is it's scary for them. There's this great big world out there, and they're just trying to compete in their own market and within the Canadian market, and then they usually expand first to the US. Going across the ocean into new markets, whether that's here in Europe or if it's in Southeast Asia, it's a big difference for them. So what we try and do is we try and simplify things for them, and we offer what we call a white glove service. So we bring them to markets, we introduce them into those markets, we ensure that the partners and stakeholders, and there's a lot of folks in this room today as well, who help facilitate the landing pad for when new SMEs want to look at new markets. And coming back to the defense side of things as well, there's a lot of SMEs that are scared to get into the defense sector because they're going to have to fill out a 1,000-page requirement form in order for them to submit a bid. Well, how do we facilitate that? So I think once we get to a place where we may have to hold their hand a little bit, but nonetheless, we need to make it simpler for SMEs, because today it's a big, wild world out there, and they're not sure how to tackle it.
Lorenzo?
These don't have the big legal departments and the big financial planning support systems that large corporations have, so they need help. I think from our side as advisors, what we do, and we work both with very large corporations and SMEs, is we emphasize the importance of looking at the joint grant funding, seed funding for startups that you have in Europe and Canada. In fact, Canada is now a member of Horizon as well. And join that up with your export strategy. So you use the grant funding as a lever for your export into a new geography. And that's something that usually different departments would look at. You know, the innovation department will apply for grants and the export department will look at markets. So we encourage that joint thinking. And the second recommendation is not to put too much pressure on Sylvie, but is join a trade association and work with them to make your voice heard. Otherwise, trade associations will struggle to represent the diversity of company sizes. That's a little bit of my 2 cents on that.
I want to hear you.
So the majority of our members are large companies, and we have national associations that tend to bring the SMEs, but it's still very complex. I mean, we talk Brussels jargon, we talk things that are very remote from the daily life of SMEs. Even with CETAs, SMEs don't make enough use of it because of the administration, because of all the burden. So we need to find ways to help them, either via government, via maybe joint services, but also, and here it's more the companies here, but we heard earlier, in defense, for example, you may have a large companies relying on smaller ones for some parts, right? So instead of saying, then you can jointly go to the other side of the Atlantic. Can you partner in trying, so can the large companies, via their established commercial relationships in one region, actually expand that together to the other parts? So yes, potentially trade association, but I'm not sure it solves it all. I think it's really the practical. So join forces, work together, provide new service, digitalize to the extent possible, but also maybe go jointly as partners where you have already an established business model on one side.
Yeah, I see you moving, Steve, but I guess I have something for you. You all mentioned CETA. I wanted to discuss this, of course. As an SME, if I would have to invest in Canada and think, is CETA really made for me? What I can do with that stuff? What would you say to them? And just to you again, Steve, do you have a concrete example of success stories of SME that have succeeded to do something with CETA?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's as scary as people think. So it's certainly a big endeavor, and it's not simple by any stretch. But I can give you an example of a company from France who recently established a facility, or not, they haven't set it up yet. They've acquired the land. They're now going through their environmental process and working with their consultants and their engineers. But this is a significant company from France. It's 100 plus years old. They're in the bakery industry. They are building a manufacturing facility in New Brunswick. It's a $50 million project that's going to employ roughly 60 people. And they've made the decision to invest in Canada. They've always been in France. They've never been outside France in the European market. And they do sell products in Canada, but they're shipping them. But as of 2 years from now, they will have full manufacturing in Canada, phase 1, and then they're looking at phase 2 and phase 3 to continue to grow, where they'll expand across Canada and into the US, depending on how the tariff situation goes.
Good. Lorenzo, do you have anything in mind about that? SME, CETA, concrete success stories that you may have heard of?
There's an example of the country I live in Spain, that I think the finance minister is going to Canada every year, the last 3 years. And what he does when he goes is he takes 10 startup founders from Spain with his business trip to meet and network with the Canadian companies that may need their services. The success stories out of that are fractional, as it's always the case, but this is exactly the mindset that, you know, the leading delegation and all of the work that you do in government and the other many people in this room do in industry needs to be. It needs to say, I need to help those startups and I need to take them with me on the journey.
I'm looking at you. Should you guys have a magic wand to make CETA even more usable by business? What would it be that you would like to do?
So we will try to work with governments to make it more SME friendly, for sure, because there's a lot that's being missed there. We would expand CETA probably in certain areas of further cooperation. So we would add a critical raw materials chapter, back to that, because that's fundamental to security, to the new world we live in. Again, whether we talk digital or defense. But also green technologies. There's a lot to do in terms of green technologies. We could do more sustainability cooperation. Maybe we should first fully ratify CETA before we expand it. But at least in terms of the tariffs, it has delivered true improvement. So yes, there's a number of areas where it can grow even further.
Lorenzo, magic wand for you?
I mean, you have now CETA, Horizon, SDP, SAFE for defense. Can we get together and harmonize and find the synergies between everything so a company doesn't need to go through 4 or 5, maybe with the minerals, 6 different agreements? Yeah. My magic wand.
I think building on that, honestly, I think what we miss, because there's a lot of things, a lot of programs, a lot of cooperations. Politicians on both sides, where do we want to play together? Tell us the top 3 sectors where EU and Canada are going to jointly work on a development plan, on a business plan. I think that's what we're missing. We're missing it in the EU for the EU, but we also miss it for our partnerships. Where do we want to play? Where can we play? Where we are not going to have cheap competition from Asia, for example. I don't want to pinpoint Asia too much, but if it's cost-driven, we will never compete. So we need to compete on other things where we have joint mutual benefits. So where is it? Top 3, top 5. By when?
I'm looking at you, Steve. Do you have to take on this? I don't know if I have much more to add than what's been added, but I would echo what has been said. I think that the easier we make it, the better. That said, I do feel in Canada right now we have a leader that is not your traditional politician and who's leading like a business with driving towards real outcomes. And he has focused on the EU. That's been very evident. He's had some other trips here recently, like to UAE, but his interest is in the EU. So he's providing guidance for us, and from a provincial standpoint, we're focused. Like, this is where we want to be. We have an affinity for the EU. Our roots are based here, and we want to work with our businesses to help facilitate that as a province as much as we can. And hopefully we can come back to Lorenzo's point where we can bring all these things together. That would just make it simpler.
Excellent. Let's talk about real opportunities. We touch upon this. We talk about. I would like to have you talking more about regions and sectors, because when we think about Canada, Europe, of course we think about Toronto, we think about Montreal, Paris, maybe Brussels. Well, not those days, but Madrid, big cities. I would like to hear from you what are the regions actually that not explode fully at this stage that we should address, and similarly, what sector do you see really as the most promising one? I mean, we can talk about digital, we can talk about whatever sectors you may like. So who wants to start?
I don't know if it's new regions. So again, I can only mostly talk for the chemical sector. We heavily dependent on infrastructure. Pipelines, the big companies are connected to smaller companies. We talk about chemical parks, and there are sometimes tens of companies in the same park. So one buys from the other to make their own products, and it goes somewhere else. And so these parks often are not too far from either a river to bring the material or a harbor. So I do think Port of Antwerp, Port of Rotterdam, these are very important places. Tarragona, we were talking about Catalonia, for example, but places where you have the logistics, for us at least, because we transport goods and we transport huge amounts of goods, hundreds, thousands of tons, then this is hugely important. So for a chemical sector, I don't think you can be too remote, maybe in some niche areas. But immediately, at least from the top of my mind for Canada, I would say, well, it shouldn't be too far from the big harbors.
I just want to build on this because we are doing something recently. We constantly ask governments to do things, but what can we do? So as matchmakers between ports, we are helping different ports globally create direct connections with the same supply chains, the same fuels, the same power infrastructure. And they start this bilateral cooperation, which then drives the ecosystem upstream into the industry. So we're starting a cooperation between Port of Huelva in Spain and Panama. We're starting one between Turkey and Italy. We're starting one between the UK and the Netherlands. And I think maybe the next step is one between Canada and Europe, wherever you want, wherever you think it's best. But finding that first step, being the first mover in that ecosystem that you were talking about. And ports have always been historically gateways of economic collaboration. So that's maybe my proposal there, Frederic, to build on.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, I would come back to the defense conversation that was had earlier. I think that's critically important. It's low-hanging fruit at the moment. I do believe that the duality of it, being able to do something in defense and then also something with the private sector, I think that's key, because where I come from in New Brunswick, we don't have a significant defense sector. However, we have a significant manufacturing sector. So we would have companies in New Brunswick like McCain's Food. So if anybody's here having a McDonald's French fry, it's probably originated somehow from New Brunswick, Canada. But there's many others that are very much like them. And then we have some significant players who support the defense industry, but also support private sector. Echoing exactly what my colleagues have said up here on the stage is Denis and myself and a colleague of mine are here this week. We met with the Port of Antwerp. Chemicals is incredibly important. Biomass, biofuel, things that are happening right now in New Brunswick alone. We're converting a coal plant to biomass. We're going to black pellets. So it's these sorts of activities that I think are going to drive not just our economy, but the global economy as we move forward. But then how do you invite industry into taking advantage of that? So in the case of the Port of Belledune in New Brunswick, where we have the largest conversion of a coal plant in North America happening, you're going to see potential green steel opportunities, perhaps methanol opportunities, and the list continues on. So, and then to add on to that, the defense sector. So in that same region today, NATO Leopard 2 tanks are being refurbished in New Brunswick. So again, manufacturing, industry, dual use, I think there's significant opportunities in those areas.
Before we continue, I know we got 5 minutes left. I'm looking at you, the audience. If anybody has something in mind, I will open the floor in a few minutes. Actually, how many people want to ask questions? You, sir? Okay, so we got one so far. I can continue. I'll come back to you in 2 minutes. So we often talk about nearshoring, friendshoring between Canada and Europe, these gateways, these trusted gateways or corridors between Canada and Europe. Any things you want to say about it? Concrete success stories that might illustrate friendshoring between Canada and Europe?
Absolutely. I think New Brunswick is the only official bilingual province in Canada, so we have an office in France. So we have seen a lot of activity from France because of our bilingualism, so we see a lot of opportunities for nearshoring, but we've also seen a lot of nearshoring, and I was telling somebody the story earlier. I was in Kyiv in 2016, and I was speaking to a company whose headquartered were in San Francisco. They were looking at nearshoring to Canada because they wanted to get their folks closer to their clients. They chose New Brunswick as a nearshoring opportunity for all the reasons that we talked about: people, infrastructure, cost. Those are the important things.
Anybody else?
Honestly, I don't quite see that much in the chemical sector, and probably because we have huge assets that are very difficult to move as well. They tend to be established, and when you invest in our sector, it's for 30, 40 years. So we don't have the flexibility to switch too quickly. Gateways and partnerships, I see a lot of talking, but not yet really the huge concrete benefits. So I'm a little bit, let's say optimistic, but not yet convinced. Convinced, absolutely, yes.
Give you an example briefly from a mining sector in Spain, because Spain, where I live, is trying to do this remining effort, and they launched 7 strategic projects for critical minerals that you've mentioned before. 2 of the 7 are Canadian-Spanish joint ventures. So there you go. That's a very typical reshoring topic, and it's happening. What the Canadian companies are finding, and we were discussing this in a roundtable last week, is the permitting, the regulations are very, very, very slow in Europe. So that's on us, on the European side, as something that we need to improve to continue attracting
regulation.
That's probably why we don't see it that quickly.
Very slowly.
So slow.
And just to add to that, I would say, to Lorenzo's point, we're also talking to the similar companies from Spain and other parts of the world, but a few from Spain who are considering Canada because they want access to those critical minerals. But then we're also talking to other companies that also want to take that critical mineral and then process it. So it feels like we're really close, but I'm a little bit like, it still feels a little far away as well.
Interesting. Sir, that would be your moment for shooting your question.
Yes, it works. Hello, my name is Thomas Jérémy Hayden-Lefebvre. I'm from Quebec. I run and started a media and communications company in France, so very much between Canada and the EU. The panel has discussed physical goods. It's discussed an exchange of business, but something that's kind of missing from this panel is natural people, the facilitation of movement of people. As businesses on both sides of the Atlantic try to trade more with the other, it follows that businesses will send their specialists to one, or that entrepreneurs will see the other market as a a great place to start business, as was my case. Do you believe that we should have more cooperation, and I wouldn't say the freedom of movement, but the facilitation of movement of natural people for large companies, but as well as for individuals?
Excellent question. I was about to ask it the next panel, but I'm glad that this panel will answer it. Thank you for this. Please.
I can speak to that really quick. So that example that I mentioned, the folks in Kyiv, we had 40 families that moved from Donetsk, Kyiv to New Brunswick, and we facilitated that whole movement. So we worked with them through the immigration, we helped provide the business case to the corporate entity, and at the end of the day, within 6 months, 40 families, husbands, wives, children, arrived in New Brunswick and started their business. So I would say we've been doing this for quite some time, and it continues today. And we actually work with a lot of companies out of France on the people side.
In my case, I'll use a personal example. So I'm here as Ricardo, but we were just acquired by WSP, a large Canadian services company. And if you think that I'm not alone, I mean, more than 2,500 colleagues in Europe have joined through acquisitions by WSP in the last 4 years. So this is creating a bilateral or maybe a global market for services and engineering. And I don't think they would do it if they didn't see an opportunity in consolidating that knowledge under one roof. So of course, I have to see how it plays out, as it just happened, but I'm very optimistic, and I hope we'll see more of that across all types of services, not just the consulting world.
I think there's, in the academic area, universities and so on, and Erasmus and so on, there's already a lot going on, which is pretty well established, arguably more with France because of the language, and there's a lot of partnerships with universities, for sure, at least in Quebec. How can we find similar incentives at different levels later in life? Engineers, maybe workers as well, because I think we probably have, I'm not an expert on Canada, but we probably have relatively similar labor rules, social rules in terms of protection of workers, in terms of social security and so on. That's another set of values we share. That could be maybe a room for, I don't know, an Erasmus for workers or whatever, skilled workers in some very specific areas, defense, very, very, again, the areas where we want to play. Then you could think of such exchanges. So I guess more can be done, building on what we already do at academic level, yeah.
Thank you very much. My last word, or last questions, because you mentioned it. Do you see any cultural gap between Canada and Europe when it's about labors or the way we work? Cultural.
So in Canada, all the premiers, along with the Prime Minister, recently announced that they're going to open up the flow of certifications across Canada. Back to your point, it would be nice if we choose certain sectors that if we could do that between Canada and the EU. Culturally, I think we're very similar. Obviously, language is different in some places, but for the most part, we have similar values, and we work the same, we operate the same.
Lorenzo, last word?
Yeah, too early to tell, but do we have a European culture anyway?
It's a wide question, but I love that you touch upon values that we can share together. It was about that, actually.
Yeah, well, I think I already mentioned quite a few of them, but certainly quality of life, quality in general of, and I would even argue that's a bit of a difference to the US. Environment, protection, social welfare, in the world of chemical safety. Safety, very important. We have relatively similar chemical safety legislation. We could do more in that space as well. So there is already a lot, yes. What we do too much, where we could inspire ourselves, maybe where Canada can help us, is, we talked about it earlier, this regulation, this regulatory disease, or this prescriptive legislation. And maybe in the area of regulatory cooperation, we could think of some more balance in terms of, yes, we need some regulation, but with some freedom to let the technologies develop. We don't have to prescribe every detail.
Perhaps
More
AI could
incentives.
help us.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you. I hope there are policymakers in the room from the European side to hear you. I believe it will just be the last sentence for the day. Thank you very much. You deserve a round of applause.
Thank you.